Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to dive into something pretty interesting, Islamic finance and its connection with Bitcoin.
Yeah, we're going to unpack how like a centuries-old approach to finance could actually impact the future of finance.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are probably thinking Islamic finance and Bitcoin. Those two things don't really seem like they go together.
Right.
But that's where Harris Irfan comes in.
Exactly.
He's shaking things up. This is a financier who is merging traditional Islamic principles with the bleeding edge of fintech.
Yeah,
And that's what we're talking about today.
definitely. And I think what's really interesting about it is a lot of people, when they hear Islamic finance, they think, oh, it's just about avoiding interest.
Right.
It's so much bigger than that.
Yeah, so let's break that down for our listeners then. What are the foundational principles here? What are we talking about with Islamic finance?
So at its core, Islamic finance is really just about aligning your money with your values. It emphasizes ethical investing and risk sharing, really rooted in tangible assets and real economic activity. So one of the core tenets is the prohibition of riba, which translates to interest.
Okay, so no profiting off of loans because that creates an imbalance
Yeah.
between lender and borrower.
Exactly. Instead, what Islamic finance encourages is risk-sharing partnerships. So think joint ventures. Everyone shares in the profits and the potential losses.
So you have skin in the game.
Precisely. And then it gets even more interesting. Islamic finance also stresses asset-backed transactions. So any financial product has to be linked to some sort of tangible asset, tying it to real-world economic activity.
Instead of something like speculative trading, which
Well,
can feel very disconnected from the real world.
yeah.
So this makes a lot of sense to me, but this would seem to create a huge conflict with the way that most modern economies operate.
Huge.
Because isn't fractional reserve banking pretty much the backbone of the system?
It is, yeah, you're exactly right. Fractional reserve banking, where banks only hold a fraction of deposits and lend out the rest, creating new money in the process, is fundamentally at odds with Islamic finance.
It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
And so it's this constant balancing act for Islamic banks where they're trying to create halal or permissible products in this already dominant system,
Right.
which is no easy feat.
And that's where Harris Irfan comes into play,
Exactly.
trying to bridge that gap.
Yeah, and he did in a very big way. While he was at Deutsche Bank, he designed these really innovative Islamic financial products. And one of his most notable achievements was structuring a $3.5 billion sukuk deal with Dubai Ports World.
Okay, now we're getting into some jargony finance terms.
Mhm.
What is a sukuk?
So a sukuk is basically the Islamic equivalent of a bond. But here's the key difference. Instead of paying interest, a sukuk represents partial ownership in a tangible asset or project. So your returns are directly tied to the success of that venture.
So it's a way to make investments that align with Islamic principles while still working within the existing financial system.
Exactly.
Very clever.
And this wasn't some small thing. The Dubai Ports World deal was massive. And it really proved that even on a large scale, you can meet those needs while adhering to Islamic finance principles.
Right.
But despite these innovations that he was making, he started to realize there were limitations.
Right, because you're still operating within a system that is built on fractional reserve banking.
Yeah.
That friction point never goes away.
You got it. And that's actually part of what led him down a very interesting path towards Bitcoin.
Wait, hold on, Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Now that seems like a complete 180. What does cryptocurrency have to do with any of this?
It seems like a huge leap, doesn't it?
Ah.
But he went from approaching Bitcoin with a healthy dose of skepticism to seeing its potential as this game changer for Islamic finance.
Okay.
And there's some really compelling reasons why.
Okay. I'm all ears.
First and foremost, Bitcoin is decentralized.
Okay.
No central bank. No government calling the shots. And this really echoes Islamic finance's goal of avoiding undue influence and really promoting ethical dealings in the financial system.
So it's like a level playing field in a way,
Exactly.
where transactions are based on rules that everyone agrees to, not on the whims of some central authority.
You got it. Now get this. This is where it gets interesting. The second point, Bitcoin actually shares some core characteristics with gold, which has historically been a very central concept in Islamic finance.
Okay, I see where you're going with this, because gold is tangible, it has inherent value. You can't just create more of it out of thin air.
Exactly.
What you're getting at.
You're picking it up quickly.
Yeah.
So Bitcoin, with its fixed supply of 21 million coins, acts sort of like digital gold.
Oh,
It's immune to the inflationary pressures that plague fiat currencies, which, from an Islamic perspective, is a big no-no because it leads to all sorts of unfair gains, economic instability.
Right, because with fiat currency, governments can just print more whenever they want and devalue everybody else's savings.
Right. And that kind of manipulation just isn't possible with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's all out there on the blockchain. It's transparent. It's unchanging. This inherent stability aligns much more closely with the principles of Islamic finance.
Okay, so no central control, a fixed supply like gold. What else makes Bitcoin appealing from an Islamic finance perspective?
Well, think about the nature of a Bitcoin transaction. It's peer-to-peer,
Okay,
completely transparent. And once a transaction is made, it's set in stone.
so it cuts out that middleman,
Yeah,
that reliance on those potentially opaque institutions.
exactly.
And it brings back that directness, that clarity that Islamic finance really values.
You got it. And it's really important to emphasize here, this isn't about like chasing quick riches or fueling speculation. Irfan's vision is about leveraging Bitcoin to build a more ethical and equitable financial system, one that's truly aligned with Islamic values.
That's a powerful concept.
Yeah.
I have to imagine, though, that not everyone in the Islamic community was immediately sold on this.
Oh, of course not.
Bitcoin, it's still a pretty radical idea.
You're absolutely right. And Irfan acknowledges that there are differing viewpoints within the Islamic community. Some hold traditional views that only gold and silver are acceptable as true forms of money.
So how do you reconcile those traditional views, which carry a lot of weight, with this vision of Bitcoin as a tool for Islamic finance?
And that's where it gets even more interesting. He argues that Bitcoin's deflationary nature, remember that limited supply we talked about,
Yeah.
that very quality might make it more aligned with Islamic principles than fiat currency.
Hold on. Now you've really got my attention.
Yeah.
Most people, when they think of deflation, they think of it as a bad thing.
Right.
So how does that work in this context?
Okay, so think of it this way. With fiat currency, like the US dollar, the government can just print more whenever they need to.
Right. That's what happened after 2008 and again during the pandemic.
Exactly. And while that might seem like a good idea at the time, it actually devalues the money that's already in circulation, leading to that instability, that unfairness we were talking about, ultimately harming the most vulnerable in society.
Those who are least able to weather those economic storms get hit the hardest.
Exactly. Now contrast that with Bitcoin. Its fixed supply actually means that it becomes more valuable over time as demand increases. This predictable, limited nature creates a much more stable foundation.
So instead of being at the mercy of governments and central banks, your money's value is determined by this transparent, predictable system.
Exactly.
I can see how that could be very appealing.
And don't forget about the security features that are baked right into Bitcoin. Incredibly difficult to counterfeit, to manipulate, again, aligning with that Islamic emphasis on trustworthy, transparent transactions.
It's fascinating how this technology, which so many people still associate with volatility, risky speculation, can be viewed through a completely different lens.
It really goes to show you the power of challenging assumptions and looking beyond the hype to see what's the deeper potential of any new innovation. And this isn't just theoretical. We're seeing Islamic fintech startups popping up, exploring how blockchain technology, the heart of Bitcoin, can be used to create financial products and services that are fully Sharia compliant.
So we've got this perfect storm brewing, this centuries-old tradition colliding head-on with this cutting-edge technology,
Yeah.
potentially revolutionizing the way we think about finance.
It's exciting stuff.
It is exciting.
And it goes way beyond just these new products. Imagine the impact this could have on underbanked populations,
Yeah.
especially in the Middle East and other regions with large Muslim populations. These communities often lack access to traditional banking.
Right.
But with Bitcoin, with blockchain technology.
They can bypass those traditional gatekeepers altogether.
Exactly.
No need for that same level of financial infrastructure. People can participate in a global financial system directly, sending and receiving money across borders, all with lower fees, greater ease.
It's incredibly empowering.
It is incredibly empowering.
Absolutely. This fusion of Islamic finance and technologies like Bitcoin has the potential to create a more ethical and equitable system while also driving social and economic inclusion on a global scale.
It really is amazing when you think about the potential here. Usually when I think about financial technology, I think disruption.
Right.
But this feels bigger somehow.
It does.
It's not about disrupting just to disrupt. It's about aligning that innovation with a clear set of values.
That's what makes it so compelling. We're not just talking about like tweaking the system that's already in place. We're talking about completely reshaping it
Yeah.
to make it more inclusive, more ethical, more globally connected,
Right.
all while staying true to these principles that have been around for centuries.
It's like Islamic finance has been waiting for a tool like this to come along, to be able to take those principles and put them on a global digital scale.
Isn't that a fascinating thought? It makes you realize how important it is to keep an open mind, to look for connections between things that you wouldn't think are connected.
Hmm.
I mean, who would have thought that a financial system that's rooted in 7th century Arabia would find common ground with the digital currency that was invented in the 21st century?
It's incredible, and it really makes you wonder what other groundbreaking innovations are out there,
Right.
if we can just break free from those old ways of thinking.
That's the beauty of a deep dive like this, right? It's not just about understanding one thing or the other. It's about opening ourselves up to new possibilities, to a future where, technology and tradition can actually work together to create a more just and equitable world.
I think it's safe to say we've only just scratched the surface today. Hopefully, this has given our listeners a lot to think about. If you're ready to go even deeper down this rabbit hole, and trust me, it's worth it, you can find links to more information in our show notes.
Yeah, definitely check it out.
And until next time, keep diving.